Hello and welcome to the lecture 11 of the Learning About Learning NPTEL course. And until now we have been concentrating on understanding how the associative strength is developed when two stimuli, a stimuli that has a native response and the stimuli does not have a native response in the context we are looking at, are co-presented, right. And we developed a model called Rescorla-Wagner model and used to explain some of the observations that we have made previously before the model was proposed, and then we also talked about the limitations of this model and where it fails. Moving on from this, in this set of lectures, in the forthcoming set of lectures, we will be looking at a different kind of learning paradigm. If you remember our initial classification of the learnings, we classified that as associative, non-associative, and within associative we talked about classical conditioning and instrumental learning or operant conditioning. Okay. The next few lectures is going to be about that and what insights can we get about learning from the experiments done to unravel these set of mechanisms. So, just to rehash, what we have seen so far is that when we have a stimulus, for example a tone, and then couple it with an outcome such as the food, we understood, we have seen that the stimulus over a period of time develops a response on its own. That is, the tone by itself develops a response on its own. In this particular case it is salivation, and we call that as classical or Pavlovian conditioning. The difference between such a learning versus the instrumental or an operant conditioning is as follows. Here the stimulus per se does not necessarily mean that there will be an outcome. There is a stimulus, we can go back to the same example of a tone, but that does not mean just the tone, arrival of the tone does not necessarily mean there will be food. The animal need to do something and we call that as a response. In this case it could be a simple lever press, pressing of a button or picking of a key, as we have seen in Jenkins' experiment by the pigeons, or pulling of a string in the experiments that we are going to see further. So, the animal needs to make a response after the stimulus has arrived. Only and only if the response is made, there will be an outcome, which could be the food or opening of a cage or any favorable outcome that the animal is happier to be in. So, now such kind of stimulus response outcome behavior when the animal acquires, we call that as the animal has acquired the instrumental or an operant conditioning. This entire process is the process of reinforcement learning. The reinforcement could be of different kinds. We will come to that in a probably in the next lecture, but the notion here is that stimulus per se does not predict the outcome. You need to respond, and the response, depending on the response there will be an outcome. Now, why would anybody do such kind of experiment, right? In parallel to Pavlov's experiment that was happening in Russia, Edward Thorndike, he was interested in understanding how animals think about things. Especially he was very much interested in animal intelligence. In fact, he wrote a book called Animal Intelligence at the end of his studies, summarizing all these findings. The question he was interested in is, we all know that the animals do develop responses. If the animals do develop responses, how do they develop? Do they develop in a do they learn and develop in a cognitive fashion, that is, do they make an expectation, do they understand the process that okay, look, there is a tone, I need to be pressing this lever in order to actually get the food, or it just goes by a reflexive in a non I mean in a way where the animal does not necessarily learn in a cognitive fashion. Okay. So, you just there is a stimulus and you just press the lever in a reflexive manner and then you get the food. Idea here is that if you are actually developing this association by in a reflexive manner, it is much like a trial and error learning. That is, for every response and every exposure that the animal has experienced for a stimulus and response outcome behavior, very many responses could have happened. The animal could have elicited many more responses. For example, he was using such kind of puzzle boxes. The box, if you actually pay close attention to, you will see that there is a pedal that is present inside this box. That pedal through the string is connected to a door latch, all right, and which of course pulls the door open. The idea here is that he is going to take his cats. He experimented on his own pets. There is a bunch of cats that he used to rear them at home, and then he would take them. It is about 13 of them. So, he would take them and put them inside this box. They will be food deprived. So, there are multiple factors here that are playing in for this animal to actually come out of the cage. Number one, they do not like to be in a confined space. They would like, when you confine them, they would like to come out, and they can see and smell the food because there are gaps here. You can actually see there are gaps between these wooden planks, and through which they can actually see the external world. The food is kept somewhere outside. So, they want to come out to that and then eat that food because of the food deprivation as well as for this getting out of this confinement. However, they do not know by themselves how to come out of them. So, they need to figure out, they need to understand that they need to press this pedal. In response to that, the door is going to open and then you can eat the food. So, his question was, when the animal is actually learning to solve this puzzle, is it really learning by making an intellectual association, that is, hey look, I am inside this box and I need to press this pedal, this pedal is connected to the door, so I am going to open, or by accident it stumbles upon it and then it just makes a correlation that whenever I stumble upon that pedal, the door is opening and I am going, the food is there. So, the learning is not conscious and cognitive in a cognitive fashion here at all. So, how would you test it? So, his argument was that, okay, look, I am going to do this multiple number of times, as the animal is not going to figure out in one time, and when I do it multiple number of times and keep measuring, how long does the animal actually takes to come out of this box, so called the latency. Now, if the animal were to really think about it and solve it, you need to solve it only once, you do not have to solve it every time in your life. So, if you solve it only once and then next time you go into that box, you know that, okay, this is why this I did that and I got this. So, now I do it again, press the pedal. On the other hand, if it is a trial and error learning, you just do not know why, there is no causal relationship that is obvious and you did not do it with the intention of the causal relationship, then so many different things that the animal could have done. So, animal really does not know what is really correlated, and the association slowly develops, wherein things that did not matter, but the animal still does. For example, as soon as he observes that as soon as the animal is put inside, the cat is put inside the box, the cat would be very anxious and he would run around the cage, grasping, clawing and pushing against every single plank that it can. In doing so, once in a while it does press on the pedal. So, now pressing the pedal is the response, but that we are interested in, that is associated with the positive contingency of opening the door. So, now but for the animal, very many responses that it did express, right, like clawing the planks and pushing against the planks, all of them, and pulling the strings, all of them are responses. So, naturally all of them would associate. However, being the pedal being the contingent one always, so over a period of time the association develops for just the pedal while the rest of them goes down. Okay. So, now you would predict two different kinds of learning behavior. In one where there is a trial and error learning, the one that we saw just now, the second case, we would see a slow progression once in a while reverting back to the latencies, because accidentally you pressed on that, you do not even the animal does not even recollect that it need to press on it. So, it has to do it again to really reinforce the fact that yes, it is the case. So, this kind of slow progression with once in a while a reversal of not pressing the pedal would be characteristic of an associative learning, which is very reflexive, not necessarily a cognitive process. On the other hand, if the animal were to really think about what is happening and then press the pedal, you would see that it has solved it once, next time onwards it should do it much more easily, and it should, I mean, not just much more easily, it should never revert back to the place where it is not able to solve that puzzle. It is a wonderful book, Animal Intelligence. It is available in archive. I will recommend strongly you guys to go through that. I am putting out two of the trials, just illustrate the point that Thorndike wants to get across, which is number 1 here. He is plotting the latency in this axis. So, right, and 12 in A is one kind of a puzzle box. So, he has a different sets of puzzle boxes. So, he is actually putting them experimenting them with all the puzzle boxes. So, 12 means the number of the cat, the 12th, that is an ID. Okay. So, he is plotting out the latency. As you can see, latency is high. So, initially the animal does not even know what it needs to do to get out of it. So, he will leave the animal in the box for about 15 minutes. By 15 minutes, if the animal does not come out, then he has to go and open and take the animal out. So, this guy figures it out. I mean, it comes out, it is not right to say it figures it out, it comes out in the second trial probably, but then that were to be the case of thoughtfully solved puzzle, you would see that the next time around when you are actually putting the animal, it should continue further, but it is actually not so, not doing that, it is actually going up, coming back again and doing this oscillatory behavior, slowly approaching towards a point where it can actually get out of the box by itself. If you notice, this is exactly what you would have predicted. This kind of a curve is exactly what you would have predicted using a Rescorla-Wagner model for a classical for modeling the associative strength in classical conditioning too, except here you are looking at the the latency, which is the higher the latency is lesser is the performance. So, you are looking at the curve in the reverse direction, the down. Good. This is not just one animal. I mean, in fact, there have been cases where like for example, in the animal 13 where very well into the plateau region, right about here, right, where you have the animal has actually reached the plateau and still it reverts back to that. Okay. And then whenever you see a gap, this gap is because in this place the animal even failed to come out of the box by itself, he has to come in. So, whenever that happens, he introduces that as a gap. I mean, in the beginning if it happens, it happens just 15 minutes, and in the middle if he had to intervene and then the animal is not able to come out, he will put that as a gap. Okay. At this point the animal even fails to come out of this box. Based on this, he proposed that what is most likely happening is that the animals are learning through a non-cognitive process in a trial and error through a trial and error mechanism. Of course, with any such hypothesis, it drew a considerable flack from the fellow psychologists. One particular thing flack of that is notable flag from Kohler in Austria. He was a strong opponent of such an idea of non-cognitive processes. So, his base for making that claim was he worked with chimpanzees to show that really chimpanzees can actually cognitively think and go about solving these problems. But the main drawback of Thorndike's experiment, he would argue, is that the causal relationship is not very apparent. That is, the cat never sees that makes the connection that pressing the pedal somehow releases the door. So, it is because of that the animal never learns. In as I was saying, in any such claims there is claims and counterclaims, but the point being whether the animal is how and if the animal is learning cognitively, how is it learning cognitively, or if it is not learning cognitively, why is not learning cognitively, is of considerable debate. And there are occasions where you would say that it is of one kind, versus there are occasions where you think that it is not of the other kind. Towards the end of these lectures, we will come and revisit this very idea and then see probably what is the current view or what is our view in this regard. But needless to say, you are able to ask these questions, ask such questions and probe these phenomena because of this development of the stimulus response outcome behavior. Of course, when you do that, that behavior by itself brings in its own set of phenomena and parameters that one need to characterize and understand. And for doing that, such kind of puzzle box, while it is a very important first step, is not by any means the final step. So, Skinner developed much more much more laboratory user friendly apparatus is known as a Skinner box for operant conditioning, wherein the animal is in here, it is a rat, it is exposed to a set of cues here. One is the contextual cues where the animal is being present with the grades and the box and so on and so forth, and the animal is having the opportunity to press a horizontal bar here, right. This horizontal bar besides that animal is called the lever, right. So, that is marked here. There is a horizontal bar that the animal can actually press with its paw, and there are set of cues, visual cues. So, these are cue lights or a tone, a speaker that can be used to play a sound. More importantly, whenever the animal is engaged in any of these responses, the outcome for that would be a food pellet dispensed through this sort of an arrangement called as magazine. So, whenever the animal is actually pressing the lever, after a few minutes the food pellet rolls and then makes a characteristic sound of the of it coming down and into and holding into this box. Now, that sound together with the fact that it has to retrieve that food in a certain period of time, if the food is not going to stay there for a forever, these two facts together draws the animal to actually develop the behavior of pressing the lever and then associating with the fact that it is going to get the food. So, response outcome, that association we are actually forming, and such kind of training is very important when you are doing an operant conditioning thing, and this is called as a magazine training, basically. So, what you can actually do is that when the animal is many times it is auto shaping, they will shape by themselves, but when you have to forcefully shape them, what you do is you periodically dispense the pellets, just making sure that there is that noise, and then withdraw the pellets in a short period of time, so that they understand that the food is being delivered, and slowly couple it with the lever presses. So, such kind of pre-training or shaping one can do, and it allows us to study now a stimulus, and then when you present a stimulus, animal learns to learn in response to that stimulus, and that stimulus alone you need to press the lever and not to something else. So, such kind of training can be nicely done here, and then now you can see how many times the animal is responding to the stimulus and how many times it fails to respond to the stimulus, and that is our readout of how well the animal has established that association or how well the learning has occurred. Alright. So, since the animal is learning to operate a lever, operate an stimuli that is present in an environment to modulate its environment, it is also called as an operant. The response producing, I mean this is response by the animal that is producing a change in the environment. So, so that is why it is called as an operant conditioning too. So, this Skinner box really helped to make the transition from the very customized puzzle box arrangement Thorndike made to a laboratory setting, where you can actually go ahead and measure these and then study these behaviors. Well, now that brings to an important point. Now, what kind of outcomes would really reinforce a behavior or not reinforce a behavior, right. So, it is not necessary that you have to give food. These are called the primary reinforcers, because they just very much like our Pavlov's US, right. They by themselves have a native ability to send in a reward stimuli, right, send in act as a reward or a punishment, or whichever way you are presenting or designing the experiment. So, they by themselves can act. Apart from this, one of the phenomenal discoveries that came out from here is that there are secondary reinforcers stimuli. To start with, do not have reinforcing behavior associated with them, however, can acquire these reinforcement behaviors over a period of time when they are coupled with primary reinforcers in some certain ways. So, coming to the bigger question of what is actual, I mean what can actually act as a reinforcement, right. So, to this PreMack he put forward a very vital and a basic principle, which states that you just look at the behavior, you do not have to look for anything else, you just look at the response of the animal itself. That is good enough to actually tell you which you can use it as a reinforcer and which you cannot use it as a reinforcer. In one line he summarized as most probable behavior will reinforce less probable behavior. At the start it might look like very circular and confusing. What do you mean by a most probable behavior and less probable behavior? Now, let us take an example here. Let us say we are offered with 3 different choices of food, an ice cream, a potato, a boiled potato and a spinach. Now, the responses that we would have for these 3 different stimuli would be very different, right. Most of us would like an ice cream. So, you would tend to prefer the ice cream more than a potato, more than a spinach. So, what PreMack said is that I can actually make you or me eat spinach by saying, hey, if you eat a can of spinach, I would present you a ice cream. So, that is what he means by saying most probable behavior. that is a behavior that will a response that will elicit a most probable behavior, that is a stimulus that will elicit a most probable response, that is in here a stimulus of an ice cream that is actually eliciting the behavior or response of consuming it. You can use that as a reward for eliciting a response for a stimuli that normally would have been not that favored, right, eating a spinach. So, that is pretty simple, right. So, what you are saying is that, hey, look, if you tend to eat more of this ice cream, so you definitely like that ice cream. However, what I am going to do is that if you want to eat more of the ice cream, then I actually want to you have to eat the spinach. That is how I actually make sure that you eat the spinach more. That is very simple, no brainer at all. But there is a problem with it. The problem is, what happens if it is kind of intuitive also to say that, hey, look, for you to eat the spinach, I am actually offering you more ice cream. So, it is perfectly fine, no problem at all, that is understandable. Can I under some circumstance offer or make you eat more of ice cream offering potato? So, already you are responding high to an ice cream. So, now that is not intuitive at all. So, if why would you eat potato or more spinach to get, I mean, to get more ice cream, you would not do that, right. So, that is the idea here, right. So, you have an ice cream which is a highly favorable stimuli, and can I make that highly favorable stimuli go more by offering a less favorable stimuli? If I do that, then that is kind of saying no to PreMack's principle. It turns out you can actually do that. The idea here is that each one of us have a basal line of preference. Let us say that is our example Joe, and he likes ice cream by some measure 6 quantities, potatoes by 3 quantities, spinach let us not talk about it. So, now what Timberlake and Allison said is that it is not just the how much you are favoring one food over the other, but it has to be in relation to the basal requirements. Right now you are saying I would be satisfied with 6 ice creams while 3 potatoes would be fine for me and 0 spinach is good. So, what they would do is that they would deprive you of potatoes, they will give him only 1 potato. So, clearly he is expecting 3 and he is given only 1 potato. In such a case, if you say, if you eat more ice cream, I will give you more potato, then Mr. Joe actually starts to eat more ice creams, more than 6 that normally he would have consumed to get that potato that he is wanting to get and is not able to get. So, that notion of you can actually play around with these stimuli, right. These are just stimuli that are rewarding at some different levels, and you can actually present them in this stimulus response outcome manner by ingenious manner to alter slightly less flavored food or stimulus to get more. It is such kind of phenomena and behaviors you would know only if you were to able to study the stimulus response outcome behavior. And finally, to illustrate the usefulness of that, I will bring in one more example, a very practical example done in the real world, and it has been reported. It is a 1-page paper. I strongly recommend that you read that too. This is to do with Home et al. In 1963. This is to do with how you can actually change the environment or the behavior in a creche or a child care setting. We know as young kids, toddlers, they love to run around and not sit in one place. We also know that they like to scribble, play with colors and paint and draw, engage in other activities. Now, these activities require them to be on a table. If you are a child caregiver, then the idea here is that you somehow want them to be not running around in a complete random chaotic manner, but to bring order into the system, make them sit and then do their work on the table. There are two ways to go about doing this. One is through fear, saying that do, if you do not do it, there is a consequence, there will be a punishment, and that is what is going to happen. And there are undesirable effects to that. Nobody wants to do that, but we still engage in them. The other way that these people found is that they realized the favorable behavior for the kids is to run around really. So, they decided to make use of that and then said, hey kids, for every kid or to every kid who is not engaging in this activity, but rather sitting in a table, all right. You do not just chaotically do that, but if you sit in a table and do some activity, for every 5 minutes or some x number of minutes you engage in that activity, you will be given a free run for about 2 minutes or some y minutes. So, the idea here is this is the most favorable behavior, right. This is your ice cream here. So, you are actually giving that as a reward and then asking them to go into a behavior where they can sit in the table and engage in an activity that is the behavior that you would like to reinforce. So, they are reinforcing with this running, and then no wonder in about 3 days time they report that all the kids are sitting there completely engaging in the activity, and then probably there comes the notion of a dedicated period of physical education where you are given or where the kids are given opportunity to run around. So, I hope with this set of examples I illustrated the importance of the stimulus response outcome and then some intricacies associated with them. We would like to end this lecture with the idea that stimulus response outcome behavior or phenomena is very useful, and you can use it to study the various aspects of learning. One is that what are all the stimuli that you can use it for reinforcement, how exactly does the learning happen, does it happen through cognitive or through reflexive manner. In the next lecture we will probe little further into it. We will start with the classification of the reinforcement learning itself and probe little further and then proceed forward and see what theories do we have to explain stimulus response outcome learning. Thank you.